Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep. Welcome to another episode of International Relations this week. Under this series, every Wednesday at 8 p.m., we have been covering important geopolitical developments of the last week that have a bearing on India's national interests. So today, we shall continue doing the same. We shall take up important topics that were in news over the last week with regard to international relations and understand these topics from the point of view of India's foreign policy and India's national interests. These discussions are designed to help you prepare for UPSC civil service examinations. If you're benefiting from the initiative, do support us by pressing the like button, share your comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. So let's start by taking a look at the topics we're going to cover today. In this week's discussion, the focus is on West Asia region. We have had a number of developments from West Asia. Specifically, Iran has been the focus of global geopolitics in the last week. This is going to be an Iran special episode. We shall talk about India-Iran relations in complete detail as a result of a recent controversy that has erupted. We'll also talk about China-Iran relations because there has been a very big development. Then we'll move to Israel and talk about the new citizenship law that has been brought out. This law could have an impact on the Israel-Palestine conflict. It could further destabilize West Asia. Thereby, it has an impact on Iran's interests. Israel and Iran, they have intense rivalry between them. Iran is known to back several Palestinian outfits like Hamas as well. In this context, Israel's new citizenship law does acquire significance. Then, we shall take a look at an international organization which is in news. We are going to talk about the IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency. It has been in news again with regard to Iran's nuclear weapons program. So let's understand everything about this organization, especially for your prelims. And finally, we shall take up a map, understand a place which is in news. So let's use this opportunity to look at Iran, where it is located, and understand all the important locations in and around Iran. So these are the topics we have lined up for you. Let's start with the first topic. Let's understand why a controversy has broken out between India and Iran. Iran's foreign minister, you can see him in the image here. He was supposed to visit India next month. He was supposed to carry out a historic visit. He was supposed to attend the Raisina Dialogue, which is a premier diplomatic event hosted by India. Raisina Dialogue is organized every year by ORF, the Observer Research Foundation, which is a premier think tank in India that specializes in the field of geopolitics and foreign policy. So ORF, in collaboration with the Ministry of External Affairs, organizes the Raisina Dialogue, which is a premier diplomatic geopolitical event. It brings together several leaders, experts, officials from around the world to discuss important foreign policy and geopolitical issues. It is modeled on the lines of the Shangri-La Dialogue, which takes place in Singapore. So Iran's foreign minister was supposed to visit India and participate in the Raisina Dialogue. But in the run-up to this event, the ORF, or Observer Research Foundation, had released a promotional video. It had released a promo to promote the event. And in this promotional video, there was a small clip, just around 2 seconds clip, in which Iran's president, Ibrahim Raisi, was shown along with the image of an Iranian protester. Iranian women who was protesting last year, where they cut off their hair to protest against the conservative authoritarian rule of the Shia regime. So to highlight this incident, ORF had added this clip in the promotional video, where the protester cutting off her hair was juxtaposed with the image of the Iranian president. The Iranian embassy, which saw this footage, which saw the promotional ad, took offense to it and protested against the inclusion of these images, where their president was being shown along with the protesters. The Iranian embassy objected to this video, but India didn't correct this. The ORF refused to take down the video, and as a retaliation, Iran's foreign minister has cancelled his visit to India. It's in this context that we need to understand how fragile India-Iran relations have become. One such incident is enough to derail India-Iran relations. That is the situation today. But few years ago, India-Iran were actually very close strategic partners. Even today, we have many common interests. There are areas where India and Iran are actually looking to work together, collaborate together. But there are several problems, hurdles, and challenges that has made this relationship very unstable and fragile. A small 2-second clip is enough to derail the visit and thereby derail the relationship itself. So in that context, it becomes very important to analyze and understand India-Iran relations in its entirety. This could be a very, very important mains topic. You can expect a mains question. So let's study India-Iran relations in detail. And based on this, let's talk about the China angle as well, which is the second topic. See, India-Iran have had a lot of ups and downs in their relationship. It has not always been a smooth, friendly relationship. There have been complications. Post India's independence, that is post 1947, from 1950s to 1979, we can classify this as one phase of the relationship. Because during this phase, the Cold War had begun between the two superpowers led by Soviet Union and the United States. During the Cold War, India had championed the non-aligned movement. We had committed that we are not going to align either with the Soviet power bloc or with the American power bloc. India had championed a third neutral path, that is the non-aligned movement. Whereas Iran, during this period, was ruled by the Shah of Iran, who was seen as a very, very close ally of the United States. Believe it or not, Iran was a very close ally of the US during this period. Many even alleged that the Shah of Iran was a puppet of the US. It was alleged that he was installed by the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency, which carried out a regime change in 1950s to install a pro-US government in Iran. During this period, there was a clear ideological difference between India and Iran. While India was non-aligned, strictly committed to non-alignment, at least until 1971, Iran, on the other hand, was firmly aligned with the United States. So this ideological divide kept India-Iran a little away in their diplomatic relations. Then in 1971, when the liberation of Bangladesh war took place, and when India was assisting in the liberation war by fighting against Pakistan, the US became hostile to India. As the US became hostile to India, India was forced to abandon non-alignment. And we firmly sided with the Soviet Union by signing a historic treaty in 1971. India-Soviet Union signed the Treaty of Peace and Friendship, and thus India aligned with the Soviet Union during the Cold War. So again, the ideological divide between India and Iran increased even further post 1971. Because now India had aligned with the Soviet Union, whereas US and Iran were very close allies. So from 1940s, that is 1950s to 1979, for these 2-3 decades, there was no right situation for India-Iran to work together and get closer to each other. Then in 1979 came the Iranian Revolution. The mass revolution led by the people of Iran, which was later hijacked by radical Shia clerics. The Shia conservatives and the radical Shia clerics hijacked the revolution against the Shah of Iran. The Shah of Iran's regime had become very unpopular. Shah of Iran was seen as a puppet of the US. Iran itself was seen as an ally of the US, which was resisted by the people of Iran. Iran's economy was also facing several challenges. So at this point, the revolution led by the people of Iran was quickly hijacked by the conservative elements, the radicals, and the Shia clerics quickly took over the revolution. They successfully toppled the Iranian regime. The Shah of Iran was thrown out, and the Shia radical conservatives captured power in the country. So following the Iranian Revolution of 1979, Iran became a theological state under the Ayatollah. The Ayatollah or Ayatollah al-Khamenei appointed himself as the supreme leader of Iran. Ayatollah is a supreme religious cleric, a Shia cleric. So Iran became a theological state. It established itself as a Shia power in the region, and it came under the rule of the Ayatollah. Ayatollah al-Khamenei became the supreme leader of the country. Even today, the president, the prime minister of Iran, the government of Iran, it essentially functions under the Ayatollah, who is a religious figurehead in Iran. Following this Iranian revolution, obviously Iran became hostile to the US. This is where Iran-US hostility started. In fact, the US embassy was even seized during this period, and they held American diplomats as hostages for several weeks before they had to be rescued. So there was a complete breakdown of relations between Iran and the Western countries. Iran-UK relations broke down. Iran-US relations completely broke down. They became hostile to each other and rivalry started increasing between Iran and the Western countries. So at this point, where India was still aligned with Soviet Union, there was a slight improvement in the relationship. That is in the early 1980s. There was a slight improvement as far as economic, cultural and strategic relations were concerned. But very quickly, this relationship was disrupted because Iran continued backing Pakistan, especially against its position with regard to the Kashmir conflict. With regard to the Kashmir issue, Iran continued backing Pakistan as Iran itself had become a Shia conservative country. This position was not acceptable to India. Parallelly, the Iran-Iraq war broke out in 1980s. During this war, India had to align with Iraq. India supported Iraq during the war, directly or indirectly, because Iraq was a major oil supplier at that point of time. This angered Iran. Iran was upset that India was siding with Iraq, and India was upset that Iran was backing Pakistan over the Kashmir issue. So again, a divide came up, and throughout 1980s and early 1990s, the relations did not improve between the two countries. So as you can see, for the first 4 to 5 decades of the relationship, there was no close relations that were built. Ideologically, both countries were different. The regional and global circumstances were pushing them apart as well. Even though they had few common interests, they couldn't really come together. But the first major strategic opportunity opened up in 1995-1996 in Afghanistan. Because in Afghanistan, there was something very interesting that was happening. Afghanistan had been taken over by the Mujahideen, the Afghan Mujahideen, which had fought back the Soviet invasion. In 1979, Soviet Union had invaded Afghanistan to topple the regime, which was aligning with the US. So during the Cold War period, the Soviet Union, to protect its influence in Afghanistan, had invaded the country and it had occupied the country. The US saw this as a strategic opportunity. The US aligned with Pakistan and like-minded countries such as Saudi Arabia, and together they sponsored the creation of Afghan Mujahideen. The Pashtuns of Afghanistan and Pakistan were radicalized, and they were given weapons, training and funds by these countries, by the US, Saudi Arabia and the other Western countries, and Pakistan became their biggest ally in this covert war. It was the American secret war against the Soviet forces which occupied Afghanistan in 1979. So as Afghan Mujahideen was created by Pakistan's ISI, the Mujahideen fought an insurgent war against the occupying Soviet forces. Afghanistan became completely destabilized. It descended into a civil war. After a decade of this civil war and insurgency, Soviet forces were eventually defeated. Soviet forces retreated by 1989, and eventually it became one of the reasons for the collapse and disintegration of the Soviet Union. So as the Soviet forces quit Afghanistan by 1989-1990, the Mujahideen took over the country. A power struggle began between different factions of the Afghan Mujahideen to form the next Afghan government. In this context, some of the Mujahideen leaders, especially the student leaders, the young radical leaders, they formed a new entity called the Taliban, which emerged as a major radical political organization. Taliban was a byproduct of the Afghan Mujahideen, which had been created by the Western countries with the direct support of Pakistan. So as Taliban started rising its influence in southern Afghanistan, very quickly it captured power. It toppled all the other factions, toppled the governments that existed, and very quickly it captured power by 1996. So Afghanistan came under the rule of a radical outfit, a radical extremist outfit, which was a Sunni outfit. Is that clear? Whereas Iran is a Shia power. So ideologically, there was a concern for Iran that neighboring Afghanistan had come under the rule of Taliban, which was a radical Sunni outfit, whereas Iran is a Shia power. Similarly, India had concerns about Taliban because of Taliban's links with Pakistan and how Pakistan had used the Afghan-Pakistan border to create anti-India terror outfits and support terror groups related to the Khalistan movement and Kashmir insurgency and terrorism. India had also deep concerns about the Taliban. India saw Taliban as a terrorist outfit. We cut off all ties with Taliban, and even Taliban had broken all ties with India. It had sent off the Indian diplomats, Indian embassies were shut. We had no relations with Afghanistan at that point of time in 1996. So now both India and Iran had a common concern. Afghanistan was strategically vital for both the countries because for Iran, Afghanistan is a neighbor, and for India, the Afghan border along Pakistan's border was being used to breed terrorism against India. This is where various terror camps were created by Pakistan. The same terror sanctuaries which were used by Afghan Mujahideen were now being used to train Khalistan extremists and various Kashmir-centric outfits like Lashkar-e-Toiba, Hizbul Mujahideen and the others. So India also had very serious concerns. So India, Iran had common interests to counter the Taliban, and this aligned with the interests of Russia. Russia, which was the successor state to Soviet Union, obviously saw Taliban as a threat because Taliban at the end of the day was a byproduct of the Afghan Mujahideen, which had defeated the Soviet forces, led to the retreat of the Soviet forces and the eventual collapse of the Soviet Union. So in 1996, as Taliban captured power here in Afghanistan, these three countries aligned together, India, Iran and Russia. They aligned together to sponsor the Northern Alliance, which was a collection of few Afghan and Central Asian tribes to offer resistance against the Taliban regime. Northern Alliance was a collective coalition, a group of various northern tribes of Afghanistan with Central Asian links, like the Tajiks, the Uzbeks, Turks, and the others. So India, Iran, Russia would secretly support and sponsor the Northern Alliance to protect their interests in Afghanistan and to counter the Taliban. So this was the first time that India and Iran were really coming together. A strategic alliance was being formed, and from here onwards, India-Iran relations took off. Very soon in 2002, we signed a defense agreement as well to step up our defense relations. Prior to this, we had already worked together in covertly supporting the Northern Alliance in Afghanistan, in monitoring the terror threat emanating from the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. Even Iran was concerned about Pakistan's sponsorship of terrorism because Pakistan had bred multiple terror organizations along the Afghanistan-Pakistan border, which was now a threat to Iran as well. Iranian diplomats were kidnapped by terrorists along the Afghan border. So Iran was also concerned about Pakistan's sponsorship of terrorism. Due to these aligning interests, India and Iran started working together. We started collaborating together to share intelligence, to carry out joint operations, even signed a defense agreement. More importantly, we started focusing on our economic relations. Iran is a major country in the Persian Gulf. If you observe the map here, this is the Persian Gulf, the source of most of the global oil and gas supplies. Iran is also a major producer of oil and gas. And India is heavily dependent on West Asian oil and gas. We not only source large quantities of oil and gas from all the Gulf countries led by Saudi Arabia, which are essentially Sunni powers, but we started relying on Iran as well so that India could ensure its energy security. Iran very quickly became one of the top suppliers of oil and gas. India's ONGC, Videsh Limited or OVL, started investing in Iranian gas fields such as the Farzad B gas field. So India became an investor in Iran very quickly. We started exploring economic opportunities and connectivity became a priority for India. Because after the 9/11 attacks, the US invaded Afghanistan and Taliban had been thrown out of power. The Western coalition forces, they were hunting Al-Qaeda, they had removed Taliban from power and a civilian government had been installed in Afghanistan. So by 2001, India had reached out to Afghanistan and we started building a very close relationship with Afghanistan. India made very big investments in Afghanistan. We took up many important projects and the top focus for India was connectivity with Afghanistan and also connectivity with Central Asia. Because Central Asian countries have traditionally been very close to India. They are blessed with resources, but unfortunately, India could not extract and tap the resources of Afghanistan and Central Asia due to lack of connectivity. Because the only connectivity from India to Afghanistan has to be via Pakistan. This land route is not feasible, not viable, because not only Pakistan was denying permission, it was denying transit access to India, but any such permission, if given, right, would have been equally risky. It would have been subjected to the tensions between India and Pakistan. Then Pakistan-based terror groups could attack any such trade corridor between India and Afghanistan and Central Asia. Right? See, technically on the ground, India is supposed to share a border with Afghanistan in Gilgit-Baltistan region. India is supposed to connect with the Wakhan corridor of Afghanistan. But on the ground, we don't have this connection in reality because Pakistan has illegally occupied these territories. It has occupied Gilgit-Baltistan and parts of Jammu and Kashmir, which is POK, Pakistan occupied Kashmir. So since 1947, India does not have access to this region, which Pakistan has occupied illegally. Hence, we don't have a direct border with Afghanistan. On paper, we do claim that Afghanistan is a border. We do have a small border with Afghanistan, but this is just on paper. This is just to substantiate our claims over Jammu and Kashmir, part of which Pakistan has captured illegally from India. So lack of connectivity has become a major roadblock for India. The lack of connectivity has affected our ties with Afghanistan and Central Asia. We have not been able to fully exploit the economic investments we have made. For example, India even built a road, a strategic road in Afghanistan connecting Zaranj with Dilaram. This highway that you see here was built by India. We made many big investments. We built the Kabul Parliament. We built the Salma hydropower dam and invested heavily in schools, hospitals, etc. India even won mining contracts. The friendly Afghan government awarded the Hajigak iron ore mine to India. India had won the iron ore mining license. But the problem was connectivity. Without adequate connectivity, what do you do with these investments? How do you extract resources from Afghanistan and Central Asia? This was the big question for India. So this is where Iran became critical for India, and India-Iran worked together to execute a strategic project, the Chabahar Port project. The Chabahar Port of Iran was developed by India. India would invest in the strategic Chabahar port, and the plan was to connect Chabahar with Zahedan, a border town in Iran, through a road and railway line, so that from here we could connect with the India-built road connecting Zaranj with Dilaram. This link, transport link, would take India directly to Afghanistan, and further it could be extended to connect with Central Asia as well. This was India's grand ambition. This was our geostrategy to overcome the hurdles posed by Pakistan. The plan was to connect with Iran via Chabahar port, jointly build a road rail project connecting with Zahedan, which is an Iranian border town, that could connect with the Zaranj-Dilaram road that India had already built in Afghanistan. India even executed the Chabahar port project. We completed this. Even today, an Indian company operates one of the terminals of the Chabahar port. And we even signed a trilateral agreement in 2017. In 2017, a trilateral agreement was signed between India, Iran and Afghanistan to operationalize this trade route. When the Afghan civilian government was still in place, that is before the Taliban took over, India, Iran, Afghanistan were trading with each other via this trade route. We were sending supplies to Afghanistan and we were getting resources from Afghanistan to India. So this trade relationship had been established through a trilateral agreement. So with regard to connectivity, strategic projects and economic interests, Iran was vital for India. It was crucial for our energy security, as I mentioned. Very quickly, Iran became the second biggest supplier of oil. All right? India's OVL made investments as well in Iranian gas fields. We were even considering a pipeline between Iran, Pakistan and India, a gas pipeline connecting Iran, Pakistan and India. But from 2005-2006 onwards, this relationship was badly affected because of the American interference, because of America's constant pressure. There were other connectivity projects as well, such as INSTC project, which you can see here in the map. International North-South Transport Corridor. This is an ambitious initiative involving India, Russia, Iran and Azerbaijan. The plan under INSTC project is to create a new route linking India with Iran through the Bandar Abbas port, from where goods from India can be transported via Iran to the Caspian Sea, which is a landlocked water body, one of the world's largest lakes, where inland navigation can be used via Azerbaijan's territory to transport the goods directly to Russia. This is an ambitious connectivity corridor proposed way back in 1990s. India, Iran, Russia, along with Azerbaijan, were supposed to work on this grand initiative. But all these ambitious projects have been hit because of the state of US-Iran relations. The way in which US-Iran tensions developed after 2004-2005 has had a huge impact on India-Iran relations. This is what you need to understand. See, as Iran became more hostile to Israel, Iran swore to wipe out Israel from the map. It started backing various extremist groups like Hamas and Hezbollah, which were targeting Israel. Then Israel and US aligned together to counter Iran. As Iran started developing nuclear weapons to counter Israel and US, to counter their threat and hegemony, Iran started developing nuclear weapons as a deterrence, right? So this was a major threat for both Israel and US, and they started making attempts to derail Iran's nuclear weapons program. After 2005, multiple attempts were made by US and Israel to disrupt Iran's nuclear weapons program. Through covert operations, they tried assassinating top Iranian nuclear scientists. Top Iranian nuclear scientists were targeted and they were assassinated by the intelligence agencies of Israel and US. Mossad and CIA would run these operations assassinating the top scientists of Iran. Along with this, they even waged a cyber war campaign. It is reported that they developed a computer worm, a very sophisticated computer malware called Stuxnet, which was used to destroy Iran's nuclear centrifuges somewhere in the period of 2009 to 2010. Around this period, they waged a cyber war campaign as well by developing a sophisticated computer worm, a cyber weapon called Stuxnet, that successfully damaged the nuclear centrifuges of Iran, thus halting Iran's nuclear enrichment. Along with this, they tried targeting Iran's nuclear program with crippling economic sanctions, mainly targeted at Iran's oil and gas industry, which is the key source of revenue for Iran. Is that clear? The US brought in these economic sanctions. These were unilateral sanctions. And this is where it started affecting India. By then, Iran had become the second largest supplier of crude oil to India, a key strategic partner helping us counter terrorism, keep a watch on Pakistan, keep a watch on terror outfits. Plus, we were executing joint projects as we discussed. The Chabahar project, we were looking at INSTC project. So Iran was a great friend, a strategic partner at that point of time. But as American pressure mounted, as India-US started getting closer, the US put a lot of pressure on India to drop the IPI pipeline project. The India-Pakistan-Iran pipeline project was dropped because of American pressure. But the then Manmohan Singh government managed to bypass American sanctions as India follows an independent foreign policy. We are not aligned with any other country. We have a principle of strategic autonomy, which is the very bedrock of India's foreign policy. So India decided that our ties with Iran is extremely crucial for our energy security and for our strategic interests in Afghanistan and Central Asia. We had invested billions of dollars in Afghanistan and Iran. We couldn't risk and compromise that because of America's interests. So India bypassed the American sanctions, and from 2010 to 2012, we continued our oil trade with Iran through other routes. We stopped dollar payments. We started paying through alternate currencies by using payment institutions like the Asian Clearing Union, which is located in Turkey, in Istanbul. When this route was also blocked by the US and its sanctions, India worked out a rupee-based payment system to pay for Iranian oil. Iran would be paid in Indian rupees in an Indian bank, and Iran could purchase whatever it wanted within the Indian market, because India's rupee is not fully convertible. It does not hold value outside of India. So Iran was paid in rupees, and Iran could purchase whatever it wanted within the Indian market. So India successfully bypassed the sanctions. We went against the US To please the US on one hand, we just dropped the IPI project. But we didn't halt the Chabahar port project or the other strategic engagement we had with Iran. And more importantly, we continued the oil trade by bypassing the American sanctions. This is how our relations developed, and Iran was grateful to India because India was helping Iran and its economy. India was one of the key buyers of Iranian oil. Iran was even supplying this at a discounted price. As tensions increased, finally there was mediation which was started by the other global powers, which led to the signing of the Iran nuclear deal. The historic Iran nuclear deal was signed, also called the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. This deal was signed in 2015 between Iran and the P5+1 countries and European Union. Because tensions became so serious by 2013-2014 that it appeared that as if US-Iran might even go to war over the nuclear weapons program. For US, it was a priority to shut down the nuclear weapons program. And the sanctions were crippling Iran's economy, and Iran was retaliating by sponsoring terror groups to destabilize the region and to target Israel and even the other Sunni powers. Because there is intense regional rivalry as well between the Shia powers led by Iran and the Sunni powers led by Saudi Arabia, UAE and the others. So as Iran started targeting the other countries and as the tensions increased, it appeared that a war might be an eventuality. So to prevent this from happening, because if a war were to break out around the Persian Gulf, it would destabilize not just the region but the whole world. This region is critical. The Persian Gulf is critical for global oil supplies. It's crucial for the global economy. So at any cost to prevent war, the other global powers, they brought Iran and US to the negotiating table, and the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, that includes US, Russia, China, UK and France, along with Germany. +1 here refers to Germany. Germany acted as a mediator, and even the European Union acted as a mediator, along with UK, Russia and China. Together, they mediated this deal with Iran, and it allowed for normalization of relations. Under this historic deal, Iran agreed to shut down its nuclear weapons program. It agreed to stop its enrichment of uranium to weapons-grade uranium. It agreed to even transfer the stockpile, the weapon-grade uranium stockpile, to the other European countries. And in exchange, Iran would be provided basic nuclear technology that is needed for civilian applications, like generating electricity for medical treatment, cancer treatment, etc. In return, US agreed to lift the sanctions. This was the deal that was worked out. This was a relief for India, huge relief for India, because the tensions reduced between US and Iran, and there was no longer pressure on India from the US. India could freely set up its ties with Iran, continue its investments, focus on Afghanistan and Central Asia by taking the help of Iran. But within 3 years, we received a big blow to this arrangement when then US President Donald Trump, he withdrew US from the deal unilaterally. He broke the deal apart. He withdrew US unilaterally by alleging that Iran was still secretly developing nuclear weapons. Without any substantial evidence, Donald Trump alleged that Iran was still developing nuclear weapons. Because see, all the other partners to the agreement, European Union, Germany, even the other P5 countries like UK, France, Russia, China, they were all certifying that Iran is abiding by the nuclear deal. Iran's nuclear plants were being inspected by the International Atomic Energy Agency as part of the deal. Even the IAEA, which is an independent autonomous organization, certified that Iran is not reactivating its nuclear program. Even IAEA certified that it is abiding by the terms of the nuclear deal. But without any valid basis, Donald Trump, who was very close to the conservative right-wing Israeli government, to please Israel and in its hostility with Iran, he pulled Iran out of the deal and brought back sanctions, which crippled Iran's economy again. Tensions increased and covert wars again began between US, Israel and Saudi Arabia on one side and Iran on the other side. This time, Donald Trump put a lot of pressure on all the other countries, including India, to zero out oil imports. US brought a lot of pressure. Later, a law was passed by the US called CATSA, Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act, under which Iran was declared as one of the adversary countries, along with Russia and North Korea. So based on this, the US put a lot of pressure on India and the Modi government to cut off oil trade with a strategic partner like Iran. So under this American pressure, this time, India fell to this American pressure and zeroed out oil imports since 2018. Because India's oil companies would have taken a hit. They would have faced secondary sanctions under CAATSA, right? Plus India-US relations could have been affected. So usually India has an independent foreign policy. We don't follow unilateral sanctions. We only follow sanctions imposed by the UN. But this time, India had to give up its independent foreign policy, and the Modi government was pressurized by the US to cut off our strategic ties with Iran, and we zeroed out oil imports. Basically, we cut off oil imports completely. The second largest supplier at one point, right, became a country which was not supplying oil and gas to India anymore. India withdrew some of its investments. So obviously, all of this triggered Iran. Iran was angry, upset with India, and it started retaliating from 2018 onwards. Iran downgraded the ties with India as expected. It even dropped India from the strategic Chabahar railway project. The railway project was supposed to be jointly executed, but Iran dropped India and it started supporting Pakistan at international platforms like OIC, or the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, over sensitive issues like the Kashmir dispute and the controversy and protests that broke out over the Citizenship Amendment Act. When Pakistan tried to internationalize these internal issues of India, like the violence in Kashmir, the riots that were taking place, the stone pelting incidents, and the injuries and deaths among civilians, these issues were internationalized by Pakistan at UN and OIC. It accused India of committing human rights violations in Kashmir. Even when India revoked the special status under Article 370 and reorganized the state of J&K into two union territories, Pakistan again targeted India, tried to internationalize this internal issue of India. When protests broke out over Citizenship Amendment Act, the controversy triggered, even Pakistan again tried to exploit this issue, tried to meddle in India's internal issue and tried to bring it up at OIC and the UN. On all these sensitive subjects of India, which are internal matters of India, Iran supported Pakistan. Iran has criticized India over the handling of the Kashmir issue. It has repeatedly meddled in India's internal matters as well, as our relations have broken down. It has started aligning closely with China, and it is part of China's ambitious Belt and Road Initiative. This is a direct consequence that you see because of the American pressure on India and how US-Iran tensions have completely derailed India-Iran relations. This is the analysis that you need to understand. Trust me, it's worth spending these 35-40 minutes. I know I've taken additional time here because it's worth it, because it's a very big topic, a very important topic. Now imagine a small incident was enough to derail the relations again. That's because this dynamic is still at play. The US-Iran tensions are still present, very much present, and India is still subjected to the American pressure. It affects how India deals with Iran. So this has created complexity for India, and it has compromised our important national interests in Iran, Afghanistan, and Central Asia. Now, since last year, Iran has been facing an internal problem, right? A young woman called Mahsa Amini, whom you can see in this image here, she was detained by the notorious morality police in Iran, right? They enforce the strict dress code. As you know, Iran is a Shia conservative country, enforcing strict Sharia laws. So the morality police, they are known for their brutality in Iran, and Mahsa Amini was detained and eventually she lost her life in custody. The allegation is that she was tortured to death in custody. But Iran has denied these allegations. It has said that she died out of illness. But nevertheless, Iran's morality police and its security forces, including IRGC, they are known for their brutality. They are known for their human rights violations. Especially they have targeted women in the country. Gender and human rights have been seriously violated in Iran over the decades. So this triggered massive protests last year where civilians came out into the streets. Civilians, they protested in large numbers. Even women joined the protests. They cut off their hair as a mark of protest against Iran's conservative orthodox regime, against the authoritarian dictatorial rule in Iran. During this entire episode, Western countries were constantly backing the protests. They were targeting Iran by using the protests as an excuse. But India tried to take a neutral stand. We tried to repair our relations. We remained silent on the protests. We didn't criticize Iran. We didn't take any position on the protests. We became neutral. In fact, last year, when this topic was brought up for voting at UNHRC, at the UN Human Rights Council, the allegation was Iran was violating human rights. India actually abstained from the vote. Please remember, at this point, India was a member of the UN Security Council. We were a non-permanent member till December 2022. So India, as a member of the UNSC, as a non-permanent member, abstained from the vote to protect Iran. So we did send out a message to Iran that we are ready to repair the relations, but still it's not enough because the American pressure is still there. The US-Iran tensions are still very prevalent. That is why this small issue is enough to derail the relations again. So, as the Raisina dialogue is being hosted by India, Iran's foreign minister was supposed to visit India, take part in the Raisina dialogue, and also help repair the ties between India and Iran. India was looking forward to this visit. But the inclusion of this one image, a 2-second clip in this promotional video, has been enough to derail the visit, and Iran has expressed its anger against India for showing the protesters, women protesters who are cutting their hair, along with their president in the same image. Iran's embassy protested against this, but when India didn't take the video down, when Observer Research Foundation refused to take the video down, Iran decided to cancel the visit itself. So this is how fragile India-Iran relations have become, and in many ways we have lost an important strategic partner. So right now, India's challenge is to repair this relationship, to protect the interests, protect the investments we have made, not just in Iran, but also in Afghanistan and Central Asia. Now, related to this, we have China-Iran relations. All these topics are connected. That's why I've spent so much time in laying the foundation for you in the first topic. Last week, China-Iran relations was in news because Iran's President Ibrahim Raisi has paid a historic visit to China. This is the first visit by an Iranian president in 2 decades to China. See, China and Iran, on paper, they strategically align with each other. They have a common motive. They align with Russia's interests. They both have issues with Western countries. They are fighting their own cold wars, covert wars with Western countries, especially the US. China and Iran both align with Russia's interests as well. So it's natural to see them as strategic partners. But interestingly, it's not so simple. Yes, China, Iran have some common interests, but does not mean that everything is smooth in the China-Iran relations. See, this visit is very, very important because China is making very big investments in Iran. This could easily counter and outdo India's investments that we have made over the years. In 2021, China and Iran signed a strategic partnership plan under which China has promised to invest $400 billion in the country in the coming 25 years. In exchange, China will get a steady, reliable supply of Iranian oil. Because just like India, China is also very dependent on West Asian oil. China is one of Iran's biggest oil customer, right? So China is looking for steady, cheap oil supplies from Iran, and in return, it is promising to invest $400 billion, which will help Iran bypass the American sanctions, revive its economy, and invest in essential infrastructure in the country. Because the sanctions have had a huge impact. Iran's economy has been crippled. So during this visit, when Iranian president paid a visit to China, around 20 agreements have been signed under this strategic partnership plan. This plan was promised 2 years ago in 2021. And under this, 20 projects have been taken up across the domains of security, infrastructure, and economic projects. So China is looking to extend these initiatives, and Iran is being brought under its ambitious Belt and Road Initiative. So on one side, everything appears to be fine. It appears that China, Iran are very, very close strategic partners. However, there is an issue here. There is a friction between the two. That is why no Iranian president had visited China in 2 decades. Even though they have a strategic alignment, there is a hesitancy within China to help Iran completely. Because China has its own reservations about Iran. China does not want to compromise its larger interests by helping out Iran. Iran, on the other hand, wants greater economic assistance, economic support, as it's crippling under American sanctions. So this mismatch between the interests of China, Iran has led to issues between the two strategic partners as well. China is concerned about Iran's nuclear weapons program because China does not want another nuclear power in the region. We already have India, Pakistan, North Korea, China. Another nuclear weapon state could alter the balance of power and it could adversely affect Chinese equations in the region. So China has some reservations, some concerns about Iran's nuclear weapons program. On one hand, China has promised Iran that it will help in reviving the nuclear deal. Currently, efforts are being made by the other parties to the agreement, such as Germany, China, Russia. Russia, of course. Russia and US have completely broken off their relations since the Ukraine war started. But the other partners, at least, like China, UK, then Germany and European Union, and even France, they have all committed to revive the Iran nuclear deal. They want to bring the deal back, revive the deal, bring US back under the JCPOA so that the US-Iran relations can be stabilized. So on one hand, China has promised Iran that it is going to help in reviving the nuclear deal. On the other hand, China is doing the opposite. China does not want the deal to be revived because there is a vested interest for China. As long as the deal is not revived, as long as American sanctions are present against Iran, Iran's economy will be crippled. Iran will be desperate to sell its oil, even at a discounted price. This is what China is targeting. As long as Iran is under the pressure of American sanctions, it's going to sell oil at a discounted price with very relaxed terms. Right now, China is purchasing Iranian oil at a 30% discount, and it gets a 2-year repayment deadline. It gets a relaxed window to pay for these oil imports, and it can even pay in Chinese currency, in Chinese yuan, instead of using US dollars. So all of this benefits China. There is a vested interest for China to prolong this crisis between US and Iran. As long as the tensions remain between them, as long as American sanctions are present, Iran will be forced to sell cheaper oil and it will benefit China. It's a huge economic, strategic advantage for China. So this is something that has affected the relationship. Iran is aware of this. So Iran wants a greater commitment from China, greater economic assistance, and it wants China to push US to revive and sign the deal to lift the sanctions. But China has a vested interest here, which is probably leading China to not act with regard to reviving the nuclear deal. See, China has bigger interests to protect. It's not just about Iran. China has bigger interests in the Persian Gulf. For China, it's about oil security, energy security, just like India. At any cost, it wants to ensure its energy security, and this comes not just from Iran, but from all the other major powers in the region. China relies heavily on West Asian oil and gas. So it has to maintain good relations with the Sunni powers as well, such as Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, and the others, who are all part of GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council. So China, what it is doing, it is balancing its ties with the Sunni powers, who are part of the GCC, with Shia powers led by Iran, and it wants US to remain influential here because US acts as a stabilizing force in this volatile West Asia region. China alone is not able to stabilize West Asia, but US has enough military diplomatic presence in the region to stabilize West Asia, which is crucial for oil markets. If there is any volatility here, right, without American presence and influence, West Asia could become easily volatile. And this could affect the oil markets, which will affect the Chinese economy. So there are complex geopolitics involved here. So China is hesitant to help Iran entirely. It has bigger interests to protect in the Persian Gulf. It wants US to remain influential to stabilize the region. It has its parallel relations with GCC countries and the Sunni powers. Just few weeks back, China has signed a security agreement with the Sunni powers of GCC led by Saudi Arabia, which is a major regional rival of Iran. Iran and Saudi Arabia have intense rivalry between them. So Iran is not happy that China is working with the Sunni powers as well. So all of this has posed a concern for Iran-China relations as well. So theoretically, they have a strategic alignment between them. It appears that China is very influential and dominant. It is true to an extent. But in practice, in reality, even China, Iran have some major issues because China has bigger interests to protect in the region. And that is what you need to know. This is probably an opportunity for India, an opening that India could potentially exploit. We could, if we follow an independent foreign policy, help Iran by reviving the oil imports, we could potentially fill that vacuum, provide that required investments and economic assistance to Iran, right? So that is something India could explore. Now moving on to the next topic from the same region, even though it's not directly linked, it is still from the same region. It's related to Israel and West Asia and the Israel-Palestine conflict. Israel has brought out a new citizenship law. It's triggered a big controversy, and hence it becomes important to know what this law is all about. Israel's parliament, the Knesset, has passed a law according to which convicted terrorists, if they are funded by Palestinian Authority or any other such Palestinian outfit, these terrorists who are convicted, they could lose their citizenship following this amendment to the citizenship law. This is an amendment the Israeli parliament has done. The 1952 citizenship law has been amended. So according to the amendment, if Israeli citizens or even permanent residents who have the PR status in Israel, if they are involved in acts of terrorism, espionage, acts of war against Israel, or aiding the enemy during wartime, and if they are convicted for the offense, and if they are funded by a Palestinian group, such as Palestinian Authority, which rules and administers West Bank, if they are funded by such outfits, Palestinian outfits, they could be stripped of their citizenship by Israel. These powers are being vested in the hands of the Interior Minister. The Interior Minister, basically the Home Minister of Israel, can revoke the citizenship or the residency status of convicted terrorists if these conditions are met. The process also has been put in place. Is that clear? The Interior Minister will have to consult with an advisory committee, and based on approval from the Justice Minister, the recommendation can be sent to a court to remove the citizenship or the PR status of that person who has been convicted of terrorism. And this applies only in case where the terrorist has been funded by Palestinian outfits. Now, what's the problem with this law? The law appears fine. It appears to counter terrorism. That's what Israel is saying. Israel has said this law is necessary to deter terrorism carried out by Palestinian terrorists. On one hand, this argument is acceptable. But look at the other side. Critics have pointed out why this law is controversial. This law could be easily misused to specifically target Palestinians. Israel is often known to use excessive force, disproportionate laws to target Palestinians. It is known to carry out illegal expansion of Jewish settlements. It is known to destroy Palestinian localities. So there have been a lot of tensions between Israel and Palestine in the last few years. As long as the conflict remains, as long as Israel remains in occupation of Palestinian areas, these tensions are going to prevail. Yes, there are few extremist terror outfits like Hamas, Hezbollah and the others, many of whom are funded by Palestinian outfits like Palestinian Authority. But there are civilians who might be just protesting against Israel, right? They might be engaging in a violent protest, not exactly an act of terrorism, but even they could be branded as a terrorist under this law and their citizenship could be stripped away. Because see, in Israel, please understand, there are Palestinian Muslims as well. Around 20% of Israel is made up of Palestinian Muslims. Rest around 80% plus, it's made up of the Jewish community. So that is the religious profile. So even the Palestinian citizens, they would become the target here. Critics have pointed out that Jewish citizens will be excluded because the condition is the terrorists should have received funds from Palestinian outfits. No Jewish citizen would take those funds in reality, right? So it would be Palestinians who would be at the receiving end of this law. Even Palestinian citizens, those who have a resident status, they could become targets even if they are not involved in acts of terrorism. If the law is misused, if wrong convictions have been achieved, there are no checks and balances to protect the rights of Palestinians, and the concern is that Palestinian Israelis could be targeted. Whereas Jewish Israelis could get excluded, but Palestinian Israelis, right, they could specifically be targeted by the law and their citizenship could be taken away. This has been the concern, and hence it has led to a controversy. Now, this is very, very important to examine because since the start of this year, tensions have been increasing in Israel and Palestine. A lot of terror attacks have taken place. The number of terror attacks have gone up since January 2023. In West Bank, in Gaza Strip, terror incidents have gone up. Many Israeli civilians have been killed, around 11 Israelis. Then Israel has countered this with massive use of force. Israeli Defense Forces, the IDF, and its intelligence agencies have conducted a number of raids, and more than 50 Palestinians have been killed in just 2 months, in less than 2 months. Israel has expanded its Jewish settlements. Recently, it has approved unauthorized Jewish settlements. It has legalized them in the Palestinian areas. These are Palestinian territories which are supposed to be part of a Palestinian nation. But Israel has deprived this right to Palestinians. It has even ordered the demolition of many Palestinian homes recently. All of this has led to a controversy that Israel is overly targeting the Palestinian community, right? So it has led to very serious concerns. And on the other hand, Palestinian terrorists also have scaled up their violence. So tensions have gone up in the region. And recently, Israel has also proposed a controversial judicial reform. The new government in Israel, headed by Benjamin Netanyahu, the coalition government, it is aligned with far right-wing ideology. It has the backing of ultra-conservative Jews. Orthodox Jews are the main backers of the current Israeli government. They are known to take a very strict approach against the Palestinian issue, even at the cost of violating human rights and democratic rights. So this far right-wing government has pushed few proposals to reform the judiciary, and it wants to give more powers to the parliament over the Supreme Court. This is a direct violation of doctrine of separation of powers, which is essential for any democracy. That's why many Israeli youth, even the Jews, have taken to streets. They have protested against these judicial reforms. The proposal suggests that the parliament can override even a Supreme Court judgment with a simple majority. This is unheard of in a democracy, where through a simple majority, parliament can overrule Supreme Court rulings. The proposal also is trying to do away with the test of reasonability, which is a standard test in any democracy for the judiciary to strike down unconstitutional practices by the government and the executive. This test of reasonability is being done away with under the proposed judicial reforms. And the government is trying to give itself a role. The legislature particularly and the executive are giving themselves a role in the appointment of judges, which again could go against the doctrine of separation of powers. So a lot of serious concern has come up in Israel in the last few weeks that there is an erosion of judiciary's independence, an erosion of democracy itself that's taking place. That's why many Israeli citizens have taken to the streets. They have protested. Even a lot of Israeli Jews have protested against these reforms because this could be very, very controversial. Now you need to see the changes made to citizenship law in combination with the proposed judicial reforms. Along with this, the rising tensions could further aggravate the crisis and could create more chaos in the Israel-Palestine region. This could further destabilize West Asia, thus affect India's major interests in West Asia. Now, coming to the last two topics, let's look at an international organization which was in news this week, and finally, we'll take up a map reading exercise. Today, the topic is IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency. A very important topic for your prelims. It was in news because of Iran's nuclear weapons program. IAEA has recently carried out few inspections in Iran, and it has submitted a report to the United Nations. So let's see what is IAEA. Let's understand the important facts. It's an intergovernmental organization that was established in 1957. It's also called Atoms for Peace and Development. That's the other name for it. It's headquartered in Vienna in Austria, and it's an autonomous independent organization. Please understand this. It's part of the UN family, but it's not a UN organization. It's not a UN organization. Please understand this. It reports to the UN General Assembly and UN Security Council, but still it is an autonomous independent organization. It's part of the larger UN family, but it's not a part of the UN itself. It's not a UN organization. It's an autonomous independent organization which reports to the General Assembly and Security Council. The Task of IAEA is to promote the peaceful uses of nuclear energy, promote nuclear safety, nuclear security, prevent nuclear proliferation, and inhibit the usage of nuclear technology for military purposes. That is the development of nuclear weapons. So this is the primary objective of IAEA. This organization has done phenomenal work in the field of nuclear non-proliferation, in preventing the spread of nuclear weapons technology, and for these efforts it has even won the Nobel Peace Prize. Now, to become a member of IAEA, there is no condition as such. You need not sign and ratify the non-proliferation treaty. Even without signing and ratifying non-proliferation treaty, you can still become a member of IAEA. Alright, so India is a member. I'll come to it. We'll discuss what is India's equation. But before that, please note down, IAEA has the powers to conduct inspections. It can inspect the nuclear facilities of a country and submit a report to the UN. Those countries which have signed the safeguards agreement of IAEA and the additional protocol to it, those countries have to open up their civilian reactors for IAEA inspection. So IAEA inspectors will visit the nuclear facilities, they'll certify whether all the nuclear safety security standards are being followed. It can report the compliance of the members to the UN Security Council and the UN General Assembly. If any country is violating these standards, based on IAEA reports, UNSC can call for sanctions, economic sanctions on those countries to punish them. So that is why IAEA is a very important organization. It is promoting the peaceful applications of nuclear technology, that is for civilian purposes like generating electricity, cancer treatment, etc. It is tackling the misuse of nuclear technology. It is fighting against nuclear proliferation, the spread of nuclear technology. It is trying to prevent nuclear technology from falling into the wrong hands, into the hands of terrorists, for example. And it promotes nuclear safety and nuclear security. It lays down radiation standards, how nuclear reactors have to be built, what standard protocols have to be followed while handling nuclear material, while transporting it, while working with nuclear material. All these standards are global standards which are followed by countries around the world, including India. So India became a member in 1957 itself, and we can be a member of IAEA without even signing NPT. See, India has said we'll never sign non-proliferation treaty because it's discriminatory in nature. It will compromise our right to develop nuclear weapons. So India is firmly against NPT. Without signing NPT as well, we are part of IAEA. And as part of the India-US nuclear deal of 2004-2005, which opened up our nuclear program, which gave our nuclear program recognition, right? We have signed the safeguards agreement with IAEA in 2009, opened up our nuclear facilities for IAEA inspection. But we have separated our civilian and military reactors. Only the civilian reactors are open for IAEA to inspect. We have even signed the additional protocol to it in 2014, which brings India in line with the obligations under IAEA. So IAEA can inspect our civilian nuclear reactors and report to the UN. This brings us in line with international practices, and that is why India has won a NSG exemption. Most countries today, with the help of US and all the other countries, they are supporting India's membership of NSG, the Nuclear Suppliers Group. So we can trade in civilian nuclear technology without signing NPT. Because to become a member of NSG, signing NPT is a mandatory condition. But India has made it clear that we'll never sign NPT, because signing NPT means we'll have to shut down our nuclear weapons program. All right? So India's nuclear program has gained this recognition following the India-US nuclear deal that was signed by the then Manmohan Singh government, and we have followed it up with signing the safeguards agreement and additional protocol agreement with IAEA. We have opened up our civilian nuclear reactors for inspection, thus gaining recognition for our nuclear program. Today, most countries, most NSG members are supporting India's entry into Nuclear Suppliers Group, and they have given us an exemption. Without signing NPT, they are supporting India's entry into NSG. But of course, China is blocking India's membership. China is blocking India's entry into NSG. This is what you need to know about IAEA. Now, coming to the last topic, let's take a map of Iran, and I'll help you identify some important places and locations. Please make a note, as it can be very, very important for your prelims. This is Iran, located here in West Asia, a key West Asian power. It's a leader of the Shia countries. It works closely with other Shia powers like Syria. In Iraq as well, it finds a lot of support, which is a neighboring country. Iraq is a Shia majority nation. And Lebanon. These are the Shia powers, and Iran acts as the leader of the Shia powers in the region. These Shia powers led by Iran have intense rivalry with the Sunni powers of West Asia led by Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, Qatar, Oman, and Kuwait and the others. The Sunni powers and Shia powers have intense rivalry between them. So Iran is surrounded by Pakistan here. This is the Baloch region. The conflict hit Baloch region of Pakistan, the Balochistan region. It extends into Iran as well. Even here in Iran, you can find the Baloch people. This is where the strategic Gwadar port is located in Pakistan, which China is developing as part of the CPEC corridor. Right next to it, just a few kilometers away across the border in Iran, you have the Chabahar port, which India has developed. All right, so this is Pakistan here sharing borders with Iran. This is Zahedan, the border town, where we were planning to connect a road railway line to link with Zaranj-Delaram highway in Afghanistan. Next, Iran shares a long border with Afghanistan. It shares borders with Central Asia, with Turkmenistan here. To the north, it has a border with Caspian Sea, which is one of the world's largest lakes. It's a landlocked water body. It shares borders here with Azerbaijan and Armenia and Turkey towards the northwest region. Then it shares borders with Iraq. The conflict hit Iraq region as well. You can see important locations like Mosul, Erbil. All these were strongholds of Islamic State until recently. All right. So Iran is very influential across this region, from Iraq to Syria to Lebanon. It's known to support many extremist groups like Hamas, Hezbollah, and the others. And to the south, you find the strategic Bandar Abbas port here. This is the vital Persian Gulf, the hub of all global oil trade, oil supplies. All the Gulf countries here route their oil supplies through the Persian Gulf. And this opens to the Gulf of Oman and further into the Arabian Sea and the Indian Ocean. But these oil supplies, they pass through a very important choke point called the Strait of Hormuz that you see here. It's a narrow opening, a narrow water passage connecting the Persian Gulf with the Gulf of Oman. And this strategic strait, the Strait of Hormuz, is mainly controlled by Iran. Iran is very influential here. It has the ability to block the Strait of Hormuz, which can disrupt the global oil supplies, right? There are a lot of tensions present here. It has used radical terror groups as well to target few oil-carrying ships in the region. So Iran occupies a vital location as far as oil shipments are concerned, right? So these are some important places, locations that you should be familiar with. This is, of course, the capital, Tehran, and all the other boundaries that I have marked out and the geographical locations. Just make a note of it. It could be very helpful for a map-based question in your prelims. With this, I would like to conclude my discussion. I hope it was a good, fruitful session. Do let us know how it went. Press the like button, share your comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. So that is it from my side. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.